Jaya Radhe, Jai Krishna, Jaya Vrindavana, Shri Govinda Gopinatha, Madana Mohan, Jaya Radhe, Jaya Krishna. Jaya Radhe, Jai Krishna, Jaya Vrindavana, Shri Govinda Gopinatha, Madana Mohan. Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Kalindi Jamuna Jaya Jaya His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki, ISKCON's founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki, Grantaraj Sri Madhurya Kadambini Ki, Sri Sri Radha Radhanath Ki, Shri Nitai Gora Hari Ki, Shri Giri Govardhan Ki, Sankirtan Yajna Ki, Gopremanande, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharne Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschachate Shatane Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadha Shivas Adi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Vanchakapaturibhyascha kripa sindhubhya evacha Patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Hare Krishna. Devotees, thank you so much for coming and welcome to day 3 of our seminar on Sri Madhurya Kadambini. It's really an amazing literature, wonderful literature. I hope you're finding it interesting. Last night we talked about the different challenges which arise for someone in the earlier stages, in the beginning of Bhajana Kriya, that stage. And yes, I hope you found some food for thought there. These types of childish anathas, childish problems. Sometimes our devotees even who are practicing regularly, sometimes they find that actually they have some of those problems. I don't know if any of you identified any of them like that in your own cases. So yes, we went through that list and now we've moved on to the 3rd chapter. Now you know what I'm doing. I'm looking at the actual version which you have, rather than a version which is sort of similar but not exactly the same. So I hope that'll be helpful tonight, because we don't want to get too caught up in, this paragraph begins with this, can you find it? It may take 5 minutes to find it. Yeah, okay. So let's go. So we're now in chapter 3, the 3rd shower of nectar. And what nectar it truly is. That's discussing anatha nivritti. And we did mention on the first day how anatha, natha means useful things, helpful things. And anatha means useless things, or even not just useless, but detrimental. Like, you all understand how money works. It's bad if you have no money, zero money. But if you have minus a certain amount of money, if you're owing people money and you have no money, that's even worse, isn't it? Of course, yeah. So anathas are not just useless like zero, but they're actually detrimental, means they bring us down in our Krishna consciousness. So these are like serious anathas. And there are 4 types. Do you remember? Who can remember one of the 4 types of anathas? Oh, you're all too humble. You are. Just look at how humble you are. It's amazing. First one was anathas arising from previous sin. Do you remember that? Like there were 5 kleshas which we touched on, just briefly touched on, like ignorance, hatred, attachment, and like distinguished from just regular everyday attachments, long-standing attachments even from previous lifetimes. Like, for example, an attachment in this lifetime may be, and so often is, an attachment to a particular member of the opposite sex. You know what I mean. It's very specific and personalized, but these long-standing anathas in this regard, one would be just the tendency to become attached to members of the opposite sex in general, and even to the point of becoming attached to them in whatever species you happen to be. Yeah, if you're a giraffe, then you might admire some member of the opposite sex because they have such a beautiful neck. And a rhinoceros. Anyway, you get the idea. Yeah, certain particular features. But just the general tendency to become attached to that sort of living entity in whatever species you happen to be. So those are anathas arising from previous sin. And then we talked about a little bit about anathas arising from previous piety. Means that instead of just wanting a Krishna conscious situation, we may want a situation which is particularly comfortable or very mode of goodness. You remember I gave the example of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta. With some of his disciples, he wanted them to distribute books, but they thought it would drag them down. Obviously, they thought they were in goodness now, but it would drag them down into passion because they'd have to run around chasing people, stopping people, demanding money from people and sort of negotiating how much money from different people. So they were afraid that doing that would drag them down into the mode of passion. But you remember what Srila Bhaktisiddhanta said? My question is, when will you come up to the mode of passion? Means because there's a hierarchy. The lowest is ignorance, then passion, then goodness. So when you're going to come up, instead of thinking that sitting around the temple all day just chanting that and thinking this is goodness, but actually it may well be ignorance, just wasting time. For that matter, Prabhupada liked it, that when we finish our rounds, we do something useful. Yes. Okay, so those were anathas arising from previous piety. Then there's anathas arising from mistakes that we may commit or perform in the course of our practice of devotional service. And the worst one is anathas arising from offenses. We're going to be looking at that first of all this evening, because we got up to that point. And if you've got your book, you can look and sort of follow through, he goes back and forth a bit here and there. So offenses, it's the third paragraph there, that anathas arising from offenses refers to those arising from nam aparad. Nam aparad means offenses against the holy names. In other words, the 10 offenses. I think we're familiar with, or have heard at least, of the 10 offenses. Am I right? First offense is to blaspheme. The devotees have dedicated their lives to propagating the holy names of the Lord. And then, so there's the famous 10 offenses. And he makes the point in this, did I say, third paragraph, not the seva apparatus. I don't know if you know what he's referring to, but what he's referring to is in Nectar of Devotion, chapter 8. It's titled Offenses to be Avoided. And there are 3 lists of offenses there. The first 2 lists are about sort of 26 offenses each list, but they're what are called seva apparads. They're kind of minor. They're offenses, but they're more like minor offenses. Are any of you well read enough to know what is the first of those offenses? Do we have Bhakti Shastris here? Surely we have a few. Yes, anyway, just look down. The first one is to enter the temple either with shoes on or on a palanquin. I mean, much less likely nowadays. But to enter with shoes on, it may happen. It does happen occasionally, usually just with people who are not familiar with our standards at all. They just don't know. But anyway, that's the first one. And then there's all these others, like about 50 or so of them. And they're like secondary offenses, more like minor offenses. But still they're considered to be offenses. Yes, and then, so there's 2 lists of them. And then the third list is the 10 offenses against the chanting of the holy names. So that's in chapter 8 of Nectar of Devotion. That's what he's referring to here. And he makes the point that these offenses, these minor seva apparats, you normally don't really have to do much to really deal with them. But if you just carry on with your chanting and carry on with your Krishna consciousness seriously, then they just become nullified in due course. But he makes the point here in the same paragraph that don't think, well, what he says is one should not become careless and take advantage of being protected from seva apparats, and therefore just commit seva apparats. And for example, think, well, I'll just chant Hare Krishna, it's okay, so I won't worry about it. So then that what would otherwise be relatively at least a minor offense becomes the 7th offense in the chanting of the holy names. Yeah. To not take seriously, basically, these minor offenses as if, you don't really need to worry about them. Then it becomes the 7th offense. Who can just remind us what is the 7th offense in the chanting of the holy names? Thank you. Hare Krishna. Oh, look who's here. Oh, Mother Shamalata. Hare Krishna. Thank you for saving the day. the seventh offense, to commit sinful activities on the strength of chanting the holy names. That, well, I'm chanting the holy names, and, so I can do whatever, eat something with onions and garlic or whatever it may be, do some nonsense and just think, well, I'll just chant, and that'll overcome whatever reactions there may be. This is a nonsense, actually. Right, so let us continue on. We're going to go through this, like I think I mentioned earlier, in a bit more detail. I don't want to just race through, because there are different important points as we go through this fairly lengthy section, actually, about Nam Aparad. He makes a point. If we look down a little further, let's just see where we are. That was that paragraph. If you look down, there's 2 verses quoted, right? One 4-line verse, one 1-line verse. Are you with me? It's we've got the same versions of the book. So then he says, he addresses an interesting point. Yeah. So, the point he makes is, if we're just sort of negligent about not completing some devotional activity, is that now, is it going to be an offense, Nama Parad? And he says very strongly, you'll see there, never, that committing sin on the strength of the chanting, the 7th offense, refers to intentionally committing sin on the strength of chanting the holy names, and thinking that, yes, in this way I'll overcome the reactions to whatever nonsense thing I am deliberately doing. Yeah, but in this case, it just is referring to sort of more like accidental, that sort of thing, more like accidentally making some mistake. And he compares it to, if you look down, after this paragraph you get like a 4-line verse, but it's quite a big 4-line verse, and then the translation, you see that? Yevai Bhagavata Prokta. Well, it's 2 verses actually. Then there's a paragraph which begins, here the word nimilia, closing the eyes, means the person has eyes, not blind, but has closed the eyes. But now he's running with closed eyes. Yes, so, and in running with closed eyes, as he says, he places his feet in an overstepping or unconventional way because he's got his eyes closed. Yeah. And yes. So let's just read what he says. This verse refers to a person who takes shelter of devotional service and is practicing the primary angas, the main activities of devotional service. So the meaning is that such a person suffers no loss of result in his or her Krishna consciousness, nor are they deprived of the goal, even though they know all the angas of bhakti, but they neglect to perform some of the secondary angas as if ignorant. Yeah, basically by mistake, or an example which is given. Here's an example. Here's a practical example. That amongst the secondary angas, There's one that every day you must circumambulate the temple 3 times. You'll find it in chapter 8 if you look there, in Nectar of Devotion. But if you are, for argument's sake, if you are going on the book distribution marathon, which I hope it'll be coming up in the fairly near future, I hope you will be doing. And because you're out distributing Srila Prabhupada's books and trying to help the people like that, performing that primary anga, that one of the main parts of devotional service to preach Krishna consciousness. And because of that, you cannot come to the temple and walk around it 3 times. It'll be okay. Krishna will not hold it against you. Yeah. I don't know about walking into the temple with shoes on, but there's different, do you know the one not wearing red or blue colored clothes? You know that one? You heard that one? Yeah, anyway, just, if you've got to do some deity worship sometime, but you've only got a red sari, or maybe a red and blue sari, or a blue sari, and the others, are not clean or something like that, then don't panic. You can go and do the service, all right? Which is deity worship being one of the primary activities, and not wearing certain colors of cloth is secondary. It's a seva apparat. Is that okay? You get the idea of the principle at least. Yes, right, okay. So now, let me just see where we're going on to here. Yeah. Okay, there's an interesting point. How far down is it? Just jump over the next paragraph, closing the eyes, and go to the next paragraph. If the Nam Aparads, are you with me there? If the Nam Aparads, either long-standing or recent, have been committed unconsciously, but the fact that that has happened, the fact that those aparads are present, their presence inferred by the effect, which is a lack of advancement, then one should chant the name constantly. Do you get the idea that we, basically the point of view, sort of turn it around the other way. If you find that you're not really so inspired in Krishna consciousness, and your mind is wandering, and when there's some program, you really think, should I go or should I not, rather than yes, I'm going. That lack of inspiration, enthusiasm, and just a lack of positive Krishna consciousness, then you can understand you've committed some offenses. Yeah. The cause is inferred by the result, sort of turning it around. You get the idea. If you lose your inspiration for Krishna consciousness, or part of Krishna consciousness perhaps, then you can understand, I must have committed some offense or offenses. So what to do? Well, chant the holy names constantly. You can also, not exactly mentioned here, but you can also do a sort of stock take, so to speak, of your Krishna consciousness. How am I doing? How am I applying myself? or not applying myself. You can evaluate like that. Yeah. And then, having done a stock take, you can do a spring cleaning. I don't know if here in South Africa you do spring cleaning so much. Yeah, okay. You know what I mean? Yeah, just get in, like into the kitchen particularly, and just take things apart and just really, clean them. Right, so do that with your Krishna consciousness. But he's suggesting one should chant the holy name constantly. By that chanting, one can attain steadiness in bhakti and gradually neutralize the offenses. But if those offenses were committed not unconsciously, unconsciously you would mean you can't remember having done something wrong, but you must have, because you don't feel like the results of doing things right. But if you have actually done these things consciously, then, you got to watch out. You got to watch out. And even there are some procedures for removing the offenses. And I can just tell you a little story, which some of you I'm sure have heard before, is I was in a darshan with Srila Prabhupada. There was probably about 10 of us there. And one devotee asked about the 10 offenses against the holy names, beginning with blaspheming the devotees. And Prabhupada there in that 8th chapter of the Nectar of Devotion says, if you do those 10, or any of those 10, then you cannot overcome the reactions. And the devotee referred to that and said, but isn't there some way we can overcome the reactions? And Prabhupada gave the devotee one of his looks. I cannot imitate. And Prabhupada said, you are asking this question because you want to offend. You want to offend and just do something just to escape the reactions. Prabhupada said, but you must stop offending. No more offenses. So let's go on. Well, and just one other thing. It's kind of mentioned as we go on in this section. But Srila Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur says, a devotee, someone may think, I'm not committing offenses. And he then says, one should never think in that way. Because the proof that you are is there in that, I think particularly in that case he mentions that when you chant the holy names, tears do not just spontaneously come from your eyes like every time, and your body does not shiver in ecstasy every time you just start chanting. Then, because these are the results of advanced devotional service, advanced chanting. Yeah, so we should not say that I'm not committing offenses. If we say that, basically we're just showing the fact that we're kind of in tamagun, and we're not really seeing what we're doing clearly enough. We're not seeing how we are actually doing wrong things. So, okay, now next paragraph, this is important. Well, in fact, from here, he gives some more detailed descriptions of just four of the first four of the 10 offenses, which we'll look at. I mean, not all of them, just the first four. So you see, the next paragraph begins, sadhu ninda, or criticism of Vaishnavas, is the first of the 10 offenses against the holy name. The word ninda means animosity or malice. It's a nasty word, isn't it? So if that somehow happens, you should repent. Oh, I'm such a low-class person, I've committed an offense to a saintly person. And he means not just lip service that say, oh, I'm such a low person. Oh dear. Yeah, I've committed an offense. But he means like, really, I am such a low person. I've committed an offense like this. And a person who has been burned by fire, he's comparing this offense to fire, seeks relief in fire. According to this logic, he should nullify the offense by lamenting, resolving to come before the devotee, falling at the devotee's feet, and satisfying the devotee in whatever way it takes. It's not just a formula that you must say, oh, I'm sorry, here, take a Mangalarati sweet. Give something. Actually, you're a good devotee. That's formulaic. What it means is you have to, by your apology and your, real great concern, you have to stimulate the offended devotee to say, it's okay, thank you very much, but, I accept your apology or whatever like that. Something like that. And even, he says here, if that devotee is not satisfied by your attempt to apologize and beg forgiveness, etc., then you should render favorable service to that person according to that person's desires for many days. And sometimes the offense is so grievous that the Vaishnava's anger does not die. The devotee may remain. If you really did something atrocious, which doesn't happen that often, but occasionally, it has been known to happen, then you really have to take it very seriously. Then, so he says in the next paragraph, in extreme remorse, thinking himself most unfortunate and bound for millions of years in hell for his offense, he should give up everything and take full shelter of continuous Nam Sankirtan, and in that way he'll be delivered. If the person won't forgive you, not just on your first attempt, or your second attempt, or even your 10th attempt, that if they just will not forgive you, despite doing whatever you could possibly do as far as you can see, then just do Nam Sankirtan 24 hours a day. 24 hours. Okay? Go for it. So, then in the next paragraph he makes the point that don't think that the holy name is so powerful. Scripture says, he quotes one verse there, well, like a line I think or two, other verse, the holy name alone is sufficient to deliver an offender. So what's the need of humbling myself in front of the devotee I offended and offer respects, offer service? What's the need? No problem, I'll just chant holy names. Haribol. There you go. So this type of mentality makes him guilty of further offense. It's, sounds like it's a version of the seventh offense, something along those lines, committing sinful activity on the strength of chanting the holy names. Yeah. And then a very interesting point. You shouldn't think that this offense of sadhu ninda, or offending a devotee, discriminates between different types of devotees, meaning if you offend an advanced devotee, that's serious. But if you offend a very new devotee, or a devotee who is not practicing very seriously, then it doesn't matter. You get the idea? Yeah. He says, it's in that paragraph towards the bottom, a person cannot minimize his offense by pointing out some defect in the devotee who has been offended. So he says, well, just before that actually, it doesn't refer only to one who is fully and perfectly qualified with all the qualities mentioned in Scripture, like mercifulness, never harming others, being forgiving to all living entities. Even a person who is of very bad character, a cheater, devoid of proper behavior, malicious, devoid of samskars, full of worldly desires, if that person surrenders to the Lord, that person must be considered a sadhu. And an offense to that sadhu is serious. Even though you could say, well, as a sadhu, he's not to be taken very seriously, but still an offense to that devotee is serious. Yeah, and what to speak of a pure devotee. The next paragraph, he brings up another very important point, that sometimes you offend a devotee, or someone may offend a devotee, but because the devotee is just so advanced and pure-hearted and, just feels himself or herself so lowly that if someone criticizes them, they think, oh yes, you're right actually. And they don't get angry that, how dare you talk about me like that? The great me. Yeah. So I can tell you a tiny little story. Once we were on traveling book distribution and we were living in vans. And in the morning we chant japa, walking around the van or sitting in the van, but just there. So this particular morning, one devotee was sitting in the driver's seat chanting. Another devotee was walking around the van, and the devotee sitting in the van somehow got the feeling he must spit out. So he did, right as this devotee who's walking around walked around, and sort of, and you know what, that devotee who was walking around was such a humble devotee. He said, oh, sorry, Prabhu. Yeah. He didn't say, what do you think you're doing, or something like that, which would not have been unreasonable. Yeah. So sometimes it may happen that, let's say, we may make some offense, and we know, I just made an offense. But the offended devotee, maybe we go and say, oh, sorry, and the devotee says, no, don't worry about it. It's okay. No, just don't think about it. So, yeah. So anyway, in this particular paragraph, so you may commit such an offense, but the Vaishnava doesn't become angry because of his exalted nature. Still, the offender should fall at the devotee's feet and seek ways of pleasing that devotee to purify themselves. Because even though the devotee may forgive offenses, the dust of the lotus feet of the devotee does not tolerate offenses. Yeah. And will deliver the fruits of the offense on the guilty person. And then this Bhagavatam verse 4:13 is referred to. Those who envy exalted saints are certainly diminished by the dust of the lotus feet of the exalted saints. Yes, then something we don't really need to get into so much is that these rules may not appear with like extremely elevated devotees. Yeah. Yes. So different considerations arise when dealing in situations with very advanced devotees. Yeah. And elsewhere the example is given of King Chitraketu, 6th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. This is really what an amazing story. King Chitraketu was a great devotee. He had had personal darshan of Lord Sankarshan, who spoke to him. So he's a great devotee, and he was flying around the universe in some sort of airplane, and he flew by Kailash. And as he flew by Kailash, he saw Lord Shiva sitting there, surrounded by a group of sannyasis, like a whole group of like renunciates, advanced devotees, renounced devotees. But Lord Shiva was sitting there preaching to them with his wife sitting on his lap, in front of staunch renunciates. And generally speaking, you'd think, no, this is not right at all. And so Chitraketu laughed. There are different explanations for why he laughed. But anyway, he laughed. And Durga, the wife of Lord Shiva, cursed him for laughing at Lord Shiva. So in a sense, it was an offense, because Lord Shiva is a very great devotee, and to sort of mock him or something like that, that's not good at all. But the thing is that Chitraketu, she cursed Chitraketu, become a demon, and he became Vritrasura. This is in the 6th canto. And Vritrasura is like this monster, a demon, looking like that. And, long story, but despite being in the body of a demon, his consciousness was the consciousness of most elevated pure devotee. Yeah. The curse, in regards to his offense, had no effect on his consciousness. It affected his body. He got the body of like a really demoniac looking body, terrible body. But he remained in pure Krishna consciousness. So the point is, these conventional rules may not apply to very elevated devotees. And then just another little point, right at the end of that paragraph, you see, there is a one-sentence little paragraph, the offense of Guru Avagya. or disrespect to the Guru, the third aparad, may be considered in the same way as the first aparad. This is the third offense, right? Disobey the orders of the spiritual master. Think he's an ordinary person. Yeah, so actually, of course, the Guru is one of the devotees. He's not like another category of living entity or devotee. He's one of the devotees. He may be one of the most advanced, but he's still one of the devotees. So really, the third offense is, in essence, just like one particular version of the first offense. But because the Guru is so special and so important, it's sort of distinguished from that offense, the sort of regular first offense. Anyway, that's just by the way, more than anything. So now we go on to the second offense, misunderstanding the position of Vishnu, Shiva, and the demigods. Or, typically to think that the demigods are on the same level as Vishnu or Krishna, or even in some cases to think they're higher. I did a questions and answers session on Sunday night, and someone raised that question. Isn't Durga higher than Vishnu and Krishna? So, anyway, you are all from Hindu type backgrounds, pretty much, the great majority of you. So you know what it's about, don't you? Of course you do. How many times have you encountered it? Yeah. So anyway, he examines the point, particularly in relation to Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva, in relation to Lord Vishnu. So the first point he makes is that Lord Shiva is essentially a type of form of Lord Vishnu, a type of form, not just one of the, so to speak, regular forms, but a type of form. He's a type of form of Lord Vishnu who is in contact or under the influence of the modes of nature. Little bit, not too much. He's not just, I'm sure he doesn't watch Bollywood movies. Excuse me, I shouldn't have said that. And other things. Yeah, I'm sure he doesn't do nonsense things. But his wife is Durga, Parvati or Durga, who is the personified form of the material nature. She's Maya Devi, the goddess of illusion. So, as you all know, when a man is married to a woman, the woman exerts some influence over him. Even if he's like a really, important man. Yeah. Am I right? Am I right? I'm sure I'm right. Some influence. Yeah. Prabhupada gives the example of a high court judge. During the day he's in the courtroom and people are coming in and bowing down, sort of, something bowing down, and saying, "Your Honor, if it pleases Your Honor." And in some places, you cannot walk out of the courtroom you have to walk out backwards, because you can't turn your back on the judge. In some, I don't know about here, but some places. And like in England, the judges, they they wear these wigs, these big wigs, like super fancy. Yeah, because they're special. But when the High Court judge goes home at night, his wife does not say, "Your Honor," and bow down to him. She may even say to him, "Listen, the rubbish collection people are coming tomorrow. Can you please put out the rubbish then?" Or something like that. And he'll say, "Yes, dear." So Lord Shiva is married to Durga, who is the sum total of the material nature. The whole thing in one person. And even though he's such a big man, but he's influenced, and he's permanently influenced. In Brahma Samhita, an example is given to illustrate the point in principle. Who can remember the example given? Go on, give it a try. What's the example? Milk turned to yogurt. Milk, so Lord Vishnu's like milk. But milk can be turned into yogurt. But yogurt, once it's yogurt, that's it. You can't turn it back into milk. There's no way of doing it. It's permanent. So this is the example which is given, that Lord Vishnu is like the milk, Lord Shiva is like the yogurt. And you can't exactly say that the yogurt's not milk, because it's, basically it's milk, more or less. But still it's in a permanently transformed, and not just transformed, but soured state. Yeah, a soured state. So that's Lord Shiva, even though it's mentioned here. Sometimes he is described as being an Ishvara, or controller of the world, which is generally a term reserved for Lord Vishnu or Lord Krishna, but particularly Lord Vishnu within the material world. Are you with me here? Yeah. So we must not confuse Lord Shiva with Lord Vishnu. And let's see a little further. Then he starts talking about Lord Brahma. It's just down, I don't know, half a dozen paragraphs or something. A few paragraphs. If you just look down, you'll see there's a 4-line verse, Bhagavatam 1-23, and then in the next paragraph, he starts talking about Lord Brahma's position. Are you with me there? Can you see that? So it's generally understood Brahma may also be considered as an Ishvara. But his position as Ishvara should be understood in a different way to Lord Shiva's position as an Ishvara, or like a lord of the world. Because his position should be understood that he is a jiva like us. He's not a form of Lord Vishnu at all. He's like us. But the Lord's power, special power, has been invested in him. So we should see him like that. And even elsewhere in the 9th canto, actually, Prabhupada makes the point that every living entity, when they first enter the material world, their first birth is as a Lord Brahma. So devotees, we have all been Lord Brahmas. But look what happened to us. Oh Lord, we ended up in Johannesburg. So yeah, he is an Ishvara, he's in a special or even superior position compared to the regular jivas like us. But still, he's not on the same level as the Supreme Lord. Yes, okay. And now I'm really sort of jumping down. And here's a really interesting point. How are you going to find it? That's a good question. Yeah, so where he starts talking about Lord Brahma, go down like 3, 4, 5, 6, even 7, yeah, or 8 or so paragraphs, and you'll see a one-line verse quoted, Quachij Java Visheshatvam Harasyoktam Vidir Iveti. Can you see that? He says here, Brahma's a jiva, generally, in 99% of cases of Brahmas. They're jivas like us. But sometimes a jiva takes the role of Lord Shiva. Yes. So therefore Shiva is sometimes classed with Lord Brahma as being, in a lower position. Anyway, that's interesting, isn't it? Shaktivesh form of Shiva, empowered by Shiva, but he's not really Lord Shiva. He's just sort of filling in for him if Lord Shiva is otherwise engaged. So anyway, then he goes on to talk about offences, Shruti, Shastra, Ninda, the fourth offence, disrespecting the scriptures. Yeah, and we won't go into that so much. Then he talks about anathas arising, so now another type of anathas arising from bhakti. And this is like, you'll recognize it as we read through it. This reminds us of Taranga Rangani. You remember that one? The sixth of those kind of childish sort of deviations, or anathas you can say, but they're more childish, not so seriously. As many weeds grow along with the main plant, along with bhakti, there appears acquisition of material wealth and other facilities, worship, respect by others, comfortable positions, some fame, etc. By their nature, they have the power to influence the heart of the devotee and then expand and retard the growth of the creeper of bhakti. Yeah. It means they're more they're same types of things basically, but just in more serious forms than what was mentioned in regard to Taranga Rangani. Now, devotees, as usual, we've gone over time, but we'll just continue a little further. Is that okay? That's good, because we're going to do it anyway. So then, you know what? He is now going to talk about really interesting but slightly complicated subject. 5 grades of nullification of these anathas, sort of 5 levels of nullification, from just very sort of reducing the effects to a small degree, right up to totally wiping out the effects of aparad altogether. But there are 5 stages. Now, can you see what I'm referring to? Are you with me? Are you with me? You're with me. Good, because it's important. So, okay, let's just have a look in this paragraph here. So limited, first of all, is limited to one anatha, or just sort of one aspect of an anatha. Means, you could say, just to have a perspective on it, like maybe 10%, maybe 10% of elimination of an anatha, removal of an anatha, then affecting many anathas or aspects of anathas. So maybe that's, what would you say? Maybe sounds like it's 50%. Something, that's an approximation, of course. Then almost complete is the third level. So maybe that's 90%. Then complete. So maybe sounds like about 99% or 99.9 or something along those lines. And then absolute sounds like 108% removal of the anatha. And, oh Krishna. Anyway, then there's a description. So, okay, when we talk about the anathas, let's see, when you're in the beginning stages, where am I? So, let's talk about anathas arising from previous sin and previous piety. Am I looking in the right place? Let me just check. Oh no, we must start with, he starts with, anathas arising from nam aparad. They're more serious. This is in the same paragraph that he says, it's in regards to offenses, anathas arising from offenses, that the lowest level of removal of that sort of anatha, or some part of it, maybe 10%, is when you come to the level of bhajana kriya. Means just when you take up devotional service, really, at some point in your practice of bhajana kriya. Then it becomes pervasive, maybe more like 50% removal when you come to the level of nishta, which we'll go on to next time. Anyway, nishta, steadiness, being really steady in Krishna consciousness. Then there's general removal when you come to the level of bhava, which is like 90%. It's almost complete. When you come to the level of prema, it becomes the removal of anatha arising from offenses. The eradication is complete. But you know what it's like in South Africa. Now, and now. If someone says, I'll do it now, that means, I'll do it, I'm going to do it in a while. Now means I'm going to do it quite soon. And now means I'm going to do it now. So it's like that. Complete in this case doesn't actually mean complete, but it's sort of, 99.9 or something like that. But then only with the attainment of the Lord's association, the eradication is absolute of the anathas arising from whatever offences you've committed, with no possibility of their reappearance. Get the idea? And here's an interesting example mentioned in the Bhagavatam. The example is of Bharat Maharaj. Bharat Maharaj was on the level of bhava. In fact, the Bhagavatam itself says he was on the level of bhava. But if you know the story, do you know the story? Do you know the story? Do you know the story? Bharat Maharaj, you know the story. He fell down, became attached to a deer on the level of bhava. You know, and frankly, none of us are on the level of bhava. Yeah, but he was, but he fell down in a kind of stupid way, actually. So how could it happen? When we go through the other anathas and the levels of removal, how they're removed, you'll see none of them are still existing on the level of bhava. They're all absolutely removed before you reach the level of bhava. So what does it mean? That he fell down through being attached to a deer? It means that he had performed some aparad. And Srila Jiva Prabhupada doesn't actually address that point directly. Jiva Goswami does in Bhakti Sandhava, and he says, we don't know what he did. There's no reference to what offense he committed, but still, through like the science of Krishna consciousness, we can understand he had to have committed some namaparad, serious namaparad, so that even on the level of bhava, he wasn't free. So devotees, Hare Krishna, we will continue, not tomorrow, we are going to continue on Wednesday. So, I mean, it's a little, what can we do though? Life is like that these days. It's better to just carry on and just go through every day, but we're not able right now. But next week, Wednesday and Thursday, our temple president, Prabhu.
You will see him just now.
Okay. He is authorized. We will continue on Wednesday next week and Thursday. Okay? Hare Krishna. Did you get the idea, though, about this eradication, degrees of eradication in terms of the different levels of bhakti? You get the idea? And that's slightly technical. All right, very good. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.